I know what you're thinking, Bunk. You're thinking, did he fire 6 shots or only 5? Now, to tell you the truth, I forgot myself in all this excitement. But being this is a .44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and will blow your head clean off, you gotta ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
From the Palace at Uncle Studios in beautiful Southern California, welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters, the central location for all your workers' compensation, employment, and labor law matters. My name is Steve Appel, and I'll be your host for the next hour with some talk, news, and hopefully some answers about Work Comp Matters. Thanks for being part of the show, and if you can break away from your Work Comp Matters, feel free to give us a call and clue us in with your questions, comments, and or concerns. The phone number worldwide, 818-357-4120. You can send an email to wcexaminer@aol.com. You can be old school and send a fax. 818-475-1437. With me in studio, my right-hand man, Mike Zyma, the best-dressed man in workers' compensation, Ted Durden, my protege, Robert Ozeron, attorney. Scott's on the board. John Scalia is in Munich, Germany. And back at Work Comp Central, making sure the whole damn thing goes right, is Jake Paris. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters. Tonight, we're going to be talking about guns. We talked about guns last year. I think it was show number 25, right before the horrible, the horrific, oh my goodness, the worst show we've ever done live from the WCAB for a variety of reasons. But unless you've been living in another solar system outside the Kuiper Belt, you cannot possibly have avoided seeing and listening to all the polarization, the comments, the news reports about guns. I said it before, I'll say it again. I have shot guns. I have never owned any guns. So I'm going to rely hopefully on these guys for some good comment on the topic. I will say this. I know that going back in high school, we had security guards in high school. I believe they were unarmed. We also had narcs, guys that were maybe about 22 with the police department or whatever, that looked about 15, 16, 17. I don't know if they were armed or not, but basically they were looking for drugs and narcotics. Now I think it's about time. I believe that our children, without question, need to be protected. You never hear about these crazy people with guns going into a shooting range and killing people because they know everybody there has guns. The liquor store robberies that used to occur every so often. Now you got to figure that there's an AR-15 or a shotgun underneath the counter, so they're not going there. Where are they going? They're going to schools. Folks, it's time to protect our children and protect our schools. I don't know how the people we have assembled here feel, but I think it's time to have an armed security guard at every school. Doesn't mean they have to flash the gun, but it's time to have at least one person who's armed, a security guard in every school, and potentially also have a metal detector. And that's basically all I have to say. I know Mike's been chomping at the bit all day to talk about guns. Ted is starting to sit upright. He's ready to say something. And Robert's like me. He must have gotten up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock this morning. I am dead tired.
But the armed security guy has got to be ready to rock and roll.
Absolutely, yeah.
He's got to be ready. I could be tired.
$100,000.
Yeah, I mean, we are still getting BS stories about what happened in Florida, whether or not they thought the shooter was outside, whether or not they were waiting for SWAT. And what do you guys think about potentially having a metal detector at every school and having an armed security guard at every school?
I'm going to jump in on this, and I'm sorry, Mike. It's interesting to me, and I'll tell you why. You don't hear about things like this in minority neighborhoods. You just don't. Now, if you look at Parkland is one of the most affluent areas in Florida. The average median income in Florida is around $50,000. The average median income in Parkland is $131,000. Average cost of a home, I think, in Florida is $100,000. Average cost of a home in Parkland is almost $600,000. The point being is, you mentioned metal detectors, and a lot of minority schools, they have them. They have armed security guards. They have counselors on staff. If there's any inkling of any child that seems to be having an issue, they're interviewed several times. Why that isn't prevalent in some of the more affluent neighborhoods is beyond me. And on the same token, they have in the minority neighborhoods where you surrender the guns, get gift cards at Target, or get cash from guns and all of this, but you don't hear about that in the affluent neighborhoods. And I don't know why, because a lot of these shootings that occur, it occurs at some of the more affluent or some of the more middle-class neighborhoods because they have not taken the necessary precautions.
That's an amazing observation. I'm sure that's true. I never even thought of that.
Well, yeah, I can notice that on the news. It always is some deranged, mentally ill white kid, right? For the most part, we can call it like we see it. That's how it is.
Right.
Some autistic white kid is what it looks like on the news. And the reason it doesn't happen in minority schools may be because there's already metal detectors in place a lot of times. But the interesting part is in the minority schools, the reason they have metal detectors is because of gang violence.
Yeah, but see, there's another cultural phenomenon too. You know, everybody, I don't know if they've heard of Bernie Mac. He said we're the same, but we're different. Because if you think about these shootings that occur, it often has to do with some child, some teenager that has some issue at home. See, to that generation like myself that grew up with the Brady Bunch, we saw those scenes where Jan or Marsha or Peter or Greg, they get mad, go upstairs, stomp upstairs and slam their door. Mm-hmm. You couldn't do that in my house. Because see, one or two things are going to happen. Maybe both would. You're going to get your ass kicked, number one. Number two, the door's going to come off the hinges. You're not going to be able to have privacy like that. This whole thing that I see where parents are knocking on the kids' door and wait for, no. I give my kids one knock and then I open the door. If I see something that's going on in that room that is abnormal, that would cause me any cause for alarm, I'm going to deal with it right then and there.
Ted, what about the old adage that in the minority neighborhoods, a lot of the children spent a majority of time at home after school essentially on the floor below the window sills because they never knew when a bullet was going to come through the window. Is that an accurate assessment? Or
well, in certain neighborhoods, not in all, but in gang-riddled neighborhoods, absolutely, because you never knew when someone was going to come by and, not to coin the phrase, when the AK spray down or just shooting up for whatever reason. I mean, it does happen. It most certainly does. But I think, and I always feel this way, it begins at home. You know, having a better relationship with your children, you know, making sure that you keep track and keep tabs on what they're doing at all times. Because I would venture to guess if the parents had been in better contact, had a firmer hand on these children, mostly boys, chances are this may not have happened.
In the Florida case, though, this kid, both of his parents were dead, right? And he was raised...
His mother had recently passed, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was staying with a friend's parents or something like that?
Something like that, yes.
Yeah, and they were concerned about the fact that he had a gun, but they didn't take it away from him. They kept it in a locked cabinet.
I think they were afraid of it.
So they say.
Yeah.
So they say.
But I'm wondering what we can do in situations where it's very rare that there's zero parents in the picture or zero authority figures.
Well, supposedly the FBI and the local authorities had like 24 calls
Yes,
on
they
this
did.
kid. This kid had put a gun to another child's head at least once, if not twice. Something that's being passed around in Facebook, I don't know if any of you guys have seen it. It's attributed to Samuel Jackson, and I'm going to paraphrase. He says he grew up with guns all around him and no one ever got shot. He doesn't think that the problem here is to take guns away. The issue is to teach respect for human life.
Agreed. And respect for the damage that a gun can do. I mean, really and truly, because I grew up around guns. I'm from the South. I did hunting all the time. Small game, sometimes large game. Sometimes going out to shooting range. But you had a respect for the weapon because you knew the damage it could inflict. You really did. And so I think it's the same thing, respect for human life, but also respect for the gun and the damage that it can do.
Those are all great points, and we've got about 4 minutes left before the first musical break. Ted, I want to ask you, because, you definitely have more experience with guns than me. There's been talk about outlawing I believe it's called the AR-15, what the guy used. I read somewhere that the AR-15 is essentially the same exact gun as an M1 carbine, except there's no wood on it. Do you know if that's true or not?
Yes, it is. But my whole thing, I don't think guns like that need to necessarily be outlawed. I just don't. I mean, we talk a lot about the Second Amendment, not meaning to get into a historical perspective, but that was intended for a citizen militia, not like what we have today. But if you want to own a gun, you just have to be taught to be responsible with it, pure and simple. And I don't see one thing that was raised and nobody's followed through on. Why can't you raise the age to 21? I don't see anything wrong with that.
Well, actually, we do have a news story tonight where the California state senator is proposing an amendment to a current piece of legislation. And in fact, Mike, maybe you want to read it now. It's our first news story of the day. It's a great lead-in. He's my right-hand man. He keeps me in check and out of trouble at least 90% of the time. With the first news story of the night on Work On Matters, Mr. Mike Zyma.
A California state senator is pushing a bill to raise the minimum age to legally purchase rifles and shotguns in California to 21. Senator Anthony Portatino, Democrat from La Cañada Flint Ridge, amended Senate Bill 1100 today to prohibit someone from purchasing more than one gun in 30 days and to increase the age limit to buy all firearms to 21. Quote, as a parent, I've been distressed about what's going on in Florida and very encouraged by the activism by the students. Portantino is a father of 2 daughters. Again with the quote, anybody who has watched the young people has to be moved, and shame on folks in Washington who are not moved. If they are not going to do it, we'll do it, end quote. Current state law sets the age limit to purchase rifles and shotguns at 18 and imposes a higher age restriction of 21 on handgun sales. With some exceptions, in California, it's illegal to own an assault weapon such as the AR-15 that Nicholas Cruz used during an attack that left 17 of his Parkland, Florida classmates dead earlier this month. So the legislation appears to be getting off the ground, at least on the local level here in California. What's going on in Washington, my understanding is that the NRA met with Trump, then Trump met with governors and said, hey, you don't have to be afraid of these NRA guys. They've been afraid up to this point.
Now the thing is, you raise the age to 21, and what if someone just says, well, I'm going to join the armed services at 18, and you automatically get a gun in basic training. And in fact, you get a friggin' M16.
Yep.
Yes, you do, but at the same time, that's still under government guise and guidance. So again, that's different from getting a gun and taking it home.
You're properly supervised and learning how to shoot it properly, train with it, take it apart, clean it,
Correct.
Respect it.
Can you take the weapon off the base?
No. You cannot.
Not that, but
No.
you can get like a handgun or whatever you can buy. And
Well, the only times that I know of is that if you can take a handgun off the base is if you're a designated MP. Any other condition, I'm unaware of. Now, if you do take it off the base, you would probably have to get a special license for that. Because, again, just like police, it's government issued. It's not your personal sidearm. It's government issued.
Thank you. Once again, all good points. It's time for our first musical break. He's La Familia. He's been on the show before. He actually contributes to the show opening. Without further ado, doing Baby You're a Rich Man, here's Glenn Laughlin and the Cherry Blue Storms.
How does it feel to be one of the beautiful people? Now that you know who you are, what do you want to be? And have you traveled very far? Far as the eye can see. Baby, you're a rich man. Baby, you're a rich man too. You keep all your money in a big brown bag inside a zoo. What a thing to do. How does it feel to be one of the beautiful people? How often have you been there? Often enough to know. What did you see when you were there? Nothing that doesn't show. Baby, you're a rich man. Baby, you're a rich man too. You keep all your money in a big brown bag inside a zoo. What a thing to do.
Glenn Laughlin and the Cherry Blue Storms on Work Comp Matters. We're talking about guns, and he's been a regular contributor to the show since the inception. He's still got his bar card after 45 years. He's hanging out, though, halfway around the world in Munich, Germany, talking about guns, attorney John Scalia.
Hi, this is John with the Work Comp International Report from Munich. This week we're talking about guns. Obviously, the discussion is prompted by the most recent mass shooting at an American high school. Before I get to the substance of my podcast, let me begin with a prelude which says that I found it amusing that none of the assembled brethren were outraged that I had been surveilled by the government. Everyone launched into a dissertation about how freedom to bear arms guarantees freedom from tyranny. Apparently, no one seemed to think that the beginning of tyranny is surveillance, and that's how the government knows who is dangerous. Okay, enough of that. Now on to the discussion. The Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. The Second Amendment clearly says that the right of citizens to bear arms shall not be infringed. Or does it? Well, the amendment itself is tied in with wording about a militia. And there has been debate exactly about whether or not the militia part of the amendment is an essential part of the amendment, or whether the right to bear arms is independent from a militia. And that debate goes way, way back. We will talk about that when we get to the cases. The two most recent cases dealing with the Second Amendment are called Heller versus District of Columbia, or vice versa, in 2008, and McDonald versus City of Chicago in 2010. It should be noted that both these cases decided in favor of the individual's right to own guns as opposed to the ordinance that was in effect. It should also be noted that in both these cases, the decision was 5-4. In other words, it was a close call in both cases. Further, what is even of more interest to me as a lawyer is the fact that Justice Anthony Kennedy was in the majority on behalf of the would-be gun owner in both cases. Why is that interesting? Because in my opinion, Kennedy is probably the most reasonable member of the Supreme Court. By that, I mean he is the least ideological. He determines cases based on the facts that are presented to him. Liberals call him moderate and sometimes conservative, and conservatives sometimes call him liberal. A good indication that he just goes with where the facts dictate. Why is that important? Well, in both these cases, the plaintiffs were vetted by the organizations bringing the claim against the ordinance. In the Heller case, Heller was a federal officer. He carried a gun as part of his duties in a federal building in D.C. But because of the local ordinance, he was not allowed to carry that same gun into his house. Obviously, there's sympathy for the plaintiff here and an indication of, come on, guys, let's get real. This is absurd. This guy's federally licensed to carry a gun, does it in a federal building, and once he enters his house, you tell him he can't have the weapon? Right. The McDonald case was one which had a similarly sympathetic plaintiff. McDonald was a 76-year-old retired guy who lived in what had become a bad neighborhood. His garage had been broken into 5 times. McDonald owned, legally, shotguns, but he said he couldn't protect his garage with shotguns. The problem was that from the time he bought the shotguns, which was years ago, to now, Chicago had passed legislation. The legislation said he could not own a handgun. Again, you have to look at the facts of those cases and say, you're kidding me, right? And in both cases, that's what the Supreme Court did. Now, it should be pointed out, in all fairness, that in the McDonald case, both sides argued original intent. Both sides argued the framers' intent. Justice Stevens, who wrote the dissent saying that the ordinance should be upheld, specifically goes into detail about the origins of the Second Amendment and how it should be parsed grammatically, what the framers' intent was, citing other states that passed similar amendments, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not clear that the intent was to guarantee the individual the right to bear arms, although that's how the Supreme Court eventually decided. Okay, another interesting fact is that after the McDonald case came down, both the NRA, the National Rifle Association, and the Brady Campaign Against Gun Violence praised the result. How can this be, you say? Well, the NRA praised it because the decision came down on the side of the person who wanted to own the gun. The Brady Campaign Against Gun Violence praised it because the decision also made it clear that the Second Amendment does not guarantee you the right to have your own army. It does not guarantee you the right to create your own militia, your own unlimited set of weaponry, and that a reasonable regulation against weaponry is sustainable within the limits of the Second Amendment. In my personal opinion, that means that a ban on assault weapons would be found constitutional and in compliance with the Second Amendment. Okay, so what conclusion can we come to from all of this? Well, I came to 2 conclusions. One, the individual, certainly for now, has a right to bear arms, and that should not be infringed upon. And 2, that the individual's right to bear arms is not unlimited, that reasonable regulations restricting what kinds of arms an individual can have are compatible with the Second Amendment. Those are the conclusions I have come to, and that's the report from Munich this week.
Thank you very much, John. And just as a side note, I did comment last week that I figured that the FBI had a file on me without a doubt. With the show that I do every week, with some of the crazy stuff I've done in my personal life, some of it gets out, some of it goes into the internet. I wouldn't surprise me, but Come and get me. Here I am. My name is Steve Appel. You're listening to Work Comp Matters. We're brought to you by A1 Law and Santa Monica Tickets. If you want the #1 computer management system used by more workers' compensation attorneys than any other computer management system, give me a call at 818-357-4120 for your no-strings-attached money-back guarantee, $1 a day, A1 Law. And if you want those hard-to-get, sold-out, even front-row concert, sports, theater tickets, give our buddy Brian a call at Santa Monica Tickets, 310-395-8587. Well, you're dialed in to Work Comp Matters. Thank you very much for listening to us. If you like us, go ahead and subscribe. And if you don't like us, well, please subscribe also. We're on YouTube. We're also on iTunes. And give a shout out to my son, Nick, who constantly is working very hard to get us out on the internet. Thank you very much, my son. And if you want to come to a friendly podcast, talk about the homeless, autonomous cars, occasionally Donald Trump, and, of course, the legalization of marijuana, you're at the right place. Here's our next news story. One of the nation's largest sports retailers, Dick's Sporting Goods, said today that it will immediately end selling all assault-style rifles in its stores. The retailer also said that it would no longer sell high-capacity magazines and that it would not sell any gun to anyone under 21 years of age, regardless of local laws. The announcement, made 2 weeks after 17 students and staff members were killed in the school shooting in Parkland, Florida, is one of the strongest stances taken by corporate America on guns, adding fuel to an already heated national debate. It also carries symbolic weight coming from a prominent national gun seller. The decision drew immediate and passionate reaction on social media. By midday, the number of Twitter messages containing the company's name had jumped 12,000% from the average over the previous 10 days, according to Sprout Social, a social media management advocacy and analytics software platform. Late last week, a number of major companies, including Hertz Car Rental, MetLife Insurance, and Delta Airlines, publicly ended their relationships with the National Rifle Association, issuing brief, carefully phrased statements. I think the NRA, it's a necessary evil. What do you think, Ted?
I think that they are. I believe that the gun rights of all Americans do need to be protected, but I still think there are some laws that need to be put into play to protect the citizenry. I really do.
You know, I'd just like to say that on the way over to the studio tonight, I heard that Walmart jumped on that bandwagon.
Well, Walmart stopped selling ammunition years ago, right?
Yeah, they did. Yeah. So what bandwagon did they jump on?
I don't know. My understanding was, because I was driving also.
Well, they started the bandwagon then.
Well,
if they were so ahead of it, they started.
They stopped selling ammunition years ago.
My understanding is that they did something today in lockstep with Dick's Sporting Goods. So, but I'm nothing more specific than that.
But if they stop selling it, it's not a change in supply and demand, right? Someone else will simply sell more, most likely. So it looks like their shareholders may end up just winning a philosophical battle, but not a financial one.
A Pyrrhic victory.
Yeah.
True. All good points. It's time for our second musical break. We've got Robert's financial report coming up, and then we've got Mike's segment on guns. We will be back after our second musical break from Susan Scheller right after this. See you guys soon.
Sliding on the upside of down. Let me tell you, baby, I have earned my crown. Lord, don't let me be misunderstood. Ain't got time to watch no grass grow or romancing with a Romeo. Here's the ticket to the rodeo. Lord, come on and love me like you could. Don't say I ain't a lady. I'm a single mother, got a family. Sometimes you need a piece of candy, a little bit of something good, a little bit of something good. See, I drive carpool and I do night school, social network. Oh, I got my arms around the world. Forget about your black book. Come on, baby, take a good look. Oh, the fish is jumping on the hook. Oh, don't think I wouldn't, 'cause I would. Don't say I ain't a lady. I'm a single mother, got my family. Sometimes you need a piece of candy, a little bit of something good, a little bit of something good. Something good. Something good. Show me your good side. I ain't asking for no free ride. Come on over to my side, and you'll be feeling like you should. Oh, don't say I ain't no lady. I'm a single mother, got a family. Sometimes you need that piece of candy, a little bit of something good. Oh, a little bit of something good. Yeah, a little bit of something good.
The sweet folk rock sounds of Susan Scheller on Work Comp Matters, and we're brought to you by A1 Law and Santa Monica Tickets. If you want those hard-to-get sold-out, even front-row concert, sports, or theater tickets, give Brian a call at Santa Monica Tickets, 310-395-8587. If you want the #1 computer management system used by more workers' compensation attorneys than any other system on the planet, give me a call at 818-357-4120 for your no-strings-attached, money-back guaranteed $1 a day. A1 Law. Well, I still remember like it was yesterday, about 5.5 years ago, this sweet little puppy dog came into my office on all fours and essentially said, "Can I have a little drink? I'm thirsty. Can I have something to eat? I'm hungry." Since then, he passed the bar. He hung his own shingle. He's now got employees of his own, and he is my protege. With the Work Comp Matters Financial News Report, attorney Robert Ozeron.
All right, well, thank you very much, Steve. I'm not sure I remember the history the exact same way, but that's fine. Good evening, everyone. This is attorney Robert Ozeron with the Work Comp Matters Financial Report for the week of February 28th, 2018. The Dow Jones closed today at 25,029, down 380 today. The S&P 500 closed down 30.45 to 27.14, and the NASDAQ was also slightly down to 57.35, all the way down to 72.73. Some of the most active stocks today were General Electric, Bank of America, Comcast, Lowe's, Apple, Rite Aid, all of which were down at least 0.5% to 7.5%. However, investors did like the fact that Dick's Sporting Goods is removing assault weapons or assault-style weapons from their shelves. And the stock of Dick's today spent most of the day trading up about 1.5% higher. Futures for the S&P 500, NASDAQ, and Dow Jones Industrials were a little change. Gold closed at $13.18 an ounce, silver at $16.71, platinum $9.85, and a barrel of crude costs $61.53. The 30-year fixed mortgage is moving up to 4.28% for a conforming loan and 4.37% for a jumbo. The average median home price in Southern California is $507,000 compared to the average median price in the country, which is just around $200,000. Music streaming service Spotify today filed for a direct listing on the New York Stock Exchange. Spotify did not say how much or how many, but the company is valued at approximately $19 billion. This has been Attorney Robert Ozeron with the Workers' Comp Financial Report for the week of February 28th, 2018.
Well, thank you very much. To be perfectly honest, you did not come in all fours. You were upright on two legs. That's true.
Yeah, a little bit about the way you described it. It's kind of the way my mom describes my childhood, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not it's accurate doesn't really matter. In your head, it's what's true. And, you know, if the memory is warm and fuzzy, I say go with it. It's
exactly.
fine.
Like some people still believe that Babe Ruth called his shot. Mike would know this in the 32 World Series against the Cubs. And other people were saying that when he came up to bat, the opposing team was just throwing every obscenity in the book. So he essentially was pointing at the opposing team. And then through legends, he pointed to center field and called his own shot, right?
Right. Well, the jury's out on that, and I've read.
They actually have film on it. They have film on it.
Yes, they do, and he is pointing. Pointing.
He's pointing. Exactly.
Supposedly, he said to Gabby Hartnett, the Cub catcher, "It just takes one, Gabby."
Ooh, very good. Okay. What can I say? I've known him for 20 years. And without doubt, I coined the phrase best dressed man in workers' compensation. And here he is, you know, coming here. He's wearing a suit. He's wearing a white-collared shirt. He's got I don't know what type of glasses those are, you know what I mean? But you are, without question, the best-dressed man in workers' compensation. And, of course, he sounds like Barry White. Mr. Ted Durden with the next news story.
Thanks, Steve. You know, it's always a pleasure to be here amongst this group of guys. I just love it. Okay, next news story. Los Angeles is shaping up to be a competitive ground for 5G, the faster, more reliable, fifth-generation wireless network that promises to speed up smartphones and support the growing number of connected devices at home. Yesterday at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, T-Mobile and Sprint said that Dallas will be among the first cities where they'll build the infrastructure for 5G. The announcement came a week after AT&T said Dallas will be among the dozen markets where the company will roll out mobile 5G by the end of 2018. At the event, T-Mobile's Chief Technology Officer, Neville Ray, said that the carrier is adding 5G infrastructure in 30 cities this year. Customers in Dallas, New York, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas will be the first to experience the faster network when 5G smartphones arrive in early 2019. Starting in April, Sprint said, it will start rolling out an advanced antenna technology called Massive MIMO, M-I-M-O, so that Dallas is 5G ready in early 2019. It's also rolling out the technology in Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Washington, D.C. AT&T is the second largest wireless carrier in the country after Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint are third and fourth, respectively.
Okay, little Work Comp Matters poll here. I have T-Mobile. Robert?
Verizon.
Ted?
Verizon.
Mike?
I don't even know what I have.
You haven't even set up your voicemail yet.
I have not.
He's got an Obama phone.
The messages text me.
I saw him getting one outside of the board the other day. You just walk up to the booth and you sign up. It's amazing. I've seen it happen.
Totally amazing. Totally amazing. Mike, you've got the next news story.
The security clearance of White House senior advisor and presidential son-in-law Jared Kushner has been downgraded, significantly reducing his access to classified information. Kushner had been operating with an interim clearance at the top secret sensitive compartmented information level for more than a year. Now he is authorized to access information only at the lower secret level, according to a White House official and a person familiar with the decision, both of whom spoke on condition of anonymity. Neither source was authorized to discuss the decision publicly. Kushner lost his access to the nation's deepest secrets after Chief of Staff John Kelly ordered that White House officials with interim clearances pending since before June 1, 2017 be cut off if they haven't received permanent clearances by last Friday. A White House official confirmed to the Associated Press that Kelly's order has been implemented.
Any of you guys planning on going to Montclair, California anytime soon? It's right near Pomona.
No.
You will like this news story. Montclair, California is a 5.5 square mile town just east of Pomona, which has just made it illegal for pedestrians to text, talk on the phone, or listen to music or podcasts with two earbuds, with an earbud in each ear, while crossing the street in a crosswalk. For now, first-time offenders will get a warning, and authorities will start giving out tickets in August. The penalty for an infraction is a $100 fine. The city also plans to paint stencils on every crosswalk corner designed to catch the eye of someone looking down at a cell phone. And at the city's more than 50 signalized intersections, crews have stuck up decals depicting a no cell phone symbol below the words, "Don't be distracted." Of course, 911 calls are the exception to the rule.
Is this called behavior modification? Or
I mean, what's
social engineering, or what?
What's the point in all that? I mean, do they have some statistics that indicate that?
Yeah, they've had some serious injuries by people, pedestrians who are not looking at whether or not it's safe to cross the street. Because Ted, you said you grew up in the Brady Bunch age like I did. What's the first thing you learned? Look both ways before cross the street. Well, people aren't doing it anymore. They're texting, they're listening, they're oblivious. They're stepping off the curb into a crosswalk when a car is like 35, 40 miles an hour, and someone got severely injured.
There is actuarial evidence
they've got
for
actual.
this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've seen stories, and I think maybe one of the most notorious, it was actually made it on Good Morning America. There was a woman that was walking in the mall, and she was texting on her phone and fell into a fountain.
I saw that.
And it's recorded by the security guard.
I saw
and she
that.
actually tried to sue the mall, stating that because the security guard didn't come to her rescue. Well, she fell in the fountain and got out of it, but, she tried to make a big deal about it. And at the end of it, the interview, she finally said, well, all I want is an apology, which she got, because how's the mall going to be responsible because you weren't paying attention?
We're sorry that 10 years ago we built that fountain. We didn't know you'd be walking up to it now.
Well, there are other cases where there's a hazard on the sidewalk and somebody is texting, and it becomes an issue of whether or not the premises was maintained in a negligent fashion versus the reasonableness of the actions of the injured party.
Yeah, well,
plaintiff.
if you've got tree roots that are uprooting blocks of sidewalk, I think, Robert, what is it, 3 inches or more?
Well, I don't know the specifics, but it's a question of reasonableness. I mean,
Yes.
I did see a video. I saw the fountain video before. I've also seen one in New York where there was an open manhole type of situation. It wasn't a manhole. It was a larger cover, but to go underneath the ground. And a woman was walking and texting, and she just walked right into it. Like, she went over the railing. There was a railing there, and she fell over the railing like 20 feet into the sewer system. You can't see her. She drops out of screen, right? And there's a couple of sewer workers that popped their head out and like, what the hell just filed next to us, And then go down, they get her, and they bring her up. That was a lawsuit. And I
It
think
is dangerous behavior.
Well, yeah. Put it this way. The question is this. If everybody is texting, isn't it presumed foreseeable, right? At this point, isn't it a reasonable behavior because we all engage in it? Wouldn't it be difficult to blame somebody for, texting and walking when everybody does it? I don't know. I'm not sure that, especially if there's an accident in Montclair, and then the question would be, well, if there was a violation of law, how can you sue somebody else for their negligence, right? You were at fault, right?
Well,
You should have been cited.
No, and I agree. And again, we've had this conversation too many times to count. It's becoming too prevalent in this society to blame somebody else for our screw-ups.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you.
You screwed up. You weren't paying attention. You thought it was more important to have
Text on your phone than take
yeah.
20 or 30 seconds out to cross the street safely.
Pure and simple, pay attention to what you're doing. Pay attention to where you're going. I mean, the fact that this woman fell over a rail, fell into a manhole, fell into a fountain, why is that my fault? Why is that my problem to bear? As a city, as a department, as an agency, that's not my problem. You're the idiot that wasn't paying attention.
But we cater all types, right?
And I have to pay for that? I have to pay for that?
Well, we cater all types. And if you know something is going to happen based on the odds, right? Like negligent road design. We have cases like that. Millions of people pass the same turn and do not get injured. They never get an accident. But one person could get in an accident on a rainy night because the road might be banked at an angle that is slightly unsafe, right? Just because 99.9% of the people avoid the hazard doesn't necessarily mean that there's no negligence on the other side. I agree, in all trip and fall, all slip and fall cases, you have to come with the presumption that there is some comparative fault.
Yeah, but Robert, you're talking about a design. We're just talking about somebody texting on their phone and not paying attention and causing self-injury and trying to hold another party liable.
What about the blind? It's the same thing, right? If a blind person is there, they're pretty much constantly...
No, I'm sorry. That's a physical disability. That's an impairment. It is not the same. I don't qualify stupidity as an impairment. Not me.
Well, put it this way. First, Ted, I would never want to take a case with you on a jury like that, okay? Second, there's a reason these types of cases settle, because that opinion is not unreasonable. It's very reasonable to make people take responsibility for every step they take, under their own power. No one's pushing them. They just walked right into a hazard. That said, there should be a bit of responsibility for people to maintain, design roads, sidewalks, areas, anywhere that there's going to be pedestrian foot traffic. There has to be a presumption that people won't necessarily look where they're walking every step, right? You have to maintain the premises. It could be a shiny floor. It could be glossy. You might not even notice water there, even if you were looking, right? The owner of the building has to maintain that premises. They have to do these types of checks. Leaving a manhole cover open, regardless if somebody is texting or not, is pretty dangerous, right? We could agree on it. So there's a line. Every case should settle. That's not the type of case that goes to a jury, in my opinion. But, there's something to be said there.
And we'll be back with more things to be said after our last musical break from Mr. Tom Petty.
Well, you can't turn him into a company man. You can't turn him into a whore. And the boys upstairs just don't understand anymore. Well, the top brass don't like him talking so much, and he won't play what they say to play. And he don't wanna change what don't need to change. And there goes the last DJ who plays what he wants to play and says what he wants to say. Hey, hey, hey. And there goes your freedom of choice. There goes the last human voice. And there goes the last DJ. Well, some folks say they're gonna hang him so high, 'cause you just can't do what he did. There's some things you just can't put in the minds of those kids. As we celebrate mediocrity, all the boys upstairs wanna see how much you'll pay for what you used to get for free. there goes the last DJ who plays what he wants to play and says what he wants to say. Hey, hey, hey. And there goes your freedom of choice. And there goes the last human voice. And there goes the last DJ. Down in Mexico, and sometimes it'll kinda come in, and I'll bust a move and remember how it was back then. And there goes the last DJ who plays what he wants to play and says what he wants to say. Hey, hey, hey. And there goes your freedom of choice. There goes the last human voice. And there goes the last DJ.
Tom Petty on Work Comp Matters. My name is Steve Appelli, brought to you by A1 Law and Santa Monica Tickets. Well, he's been chomping at the bit all day. I can't wait to hear the segment. Without further ado, he's my right-hand man, keeps me in check and out of trouble at least 90% of the time, Mr. Mike Zyma.
Mass shootings. All sane people just want the shootings to stop. On one side are folks who appear to want to reconstruct the Second Amendment. On the other side are folks who appear to oppose nearly any limit on gun ownership. For simplicity, I'll call these two groups the left and the right of this particular issue. As Robert has pointed out, the right to keep and bear arms is fundamental, specifically enumerated in the Second Amendment. The First Amendment guarantees freedom of religion, speech, assembly, and the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. I agree with Robert that the Second Amendment was strategically placed behind the First so that if the rights of the First Amendment were infringed upon, the right of the Second is intended to take care of business against the government. So the battle lines are drawn. After each horrible event, tongues wag and nothing gets done, so that we keep seeing additional shootings. Could the Stoneman-Douglas aftermath be different? Will the student movement, if you will, in this regard bear fruit? If so, what might be the nature of that fruit? The left speaks of more money for various endeavors, counselors, mental health professionals, law enforcement. The right brings out the same cliches. The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. While it is true that a gun does not pull its own trigger, lots of good guys with guns did nothing to prevent or limit the scope of the Stoneman-Douglas event. School resource officer Scott Peterson took up a defensive position outside the building where the shootings were going on. It appears some on the actual police response force likewise took up defensive positions, while the gunmen walk around killing more people. Immediately after, the police chief, Scott Israel, said if folks see something not right, they should call his police department. We now know perhaps up to 20 such calls were made to his department, and his department did nothing to stop a bad guy with a gun. Israel went on to give interviews during which he touted his incredible leadership and that he was the best one to protect the citizens of his community. This is BS of Orwellian proportions. Why does Chief Israel still have a job? The people of Broward County elected him. So far, the governor doesn't appear to have the stones to remove Israel. The FBI, likewise, did nothing in the face of specific, repeated, credible threats. Law enforcement budgets could be increased tenfold, and the result would be the same. This isn't a matter of incompetence. This is a matter of indifference. Yet I'll bet no one gets fired. Universal background checks, mandatory mental health screening, a national gun ownership database, age requirements, ammunition tracking. Assumedly, all of these would still be administered and run by law enforcement agencies or some other government entity. Amend the Second Amendment? Will that fly in Peoria? Arming teachers? Did you see how many armed police officers were present at the reopening of the Stoneman Douglas School? If I were the father of a slain child, I'd likely be open to draconian measures. My wife and I are relieved that our kids are no longer in school. But what about a shooting at a sporting event, the workplace, a mall? No one is immune. Meanwhile, the tongues wag and wag. However, we may have entered a time when an A+ rating from the NRA is the surest way to get voted out of office. Are you listening, Senator Rubio?
Very nice. Very nicely done. Starting in early April, auto manufacturers and technology companies will be free to put cars onto California city streets for testing with no one at the wheel and, in fact, no one even in the car. The Department of Motor Vehicles expects to receive legal approval this week to formally publish the ground rules and will begin issuing permits for autonomous cars. Uber, a company that has clashed several times with California regulators, indicate it is looking for the state to push its comfort zone even further by allowing for testing of autonomous trucks as well. This is a significant step towards an autonomous future in the state and signals that California is interested in leading by example in the deployment of autonomous vehicles, said Sarah Aboud, an Uber spokesperson. Some companies, such as Waymo, a subsidiary of Alphabet Inc., formerly the Google Autonomous Vehicle Project, and General Motors already have been testing autonomous cars on California city streets for several years. Waymo's tests have mainly been in Mountain View. General Motors is testing cars in San Francisco. The new regulations will allow companies to test cars with no one in them, with someone monitoring each car from a remote location. Robert, I think you have the next news story.
Federal agents arrested more than 150 people suspected of violating immigration laws during a 3-day sweep across Northern California, authorities said yesterday. About half of those arrested have criminal convictions. However, many caught in the sweep have no criminal histories. Although the raids prioritize people who pose a threat, officials said anyone violating immigration laws was subject to arrest. ICE Deputy Director Thomas Human blasted so-called sanctuary laws in San Francisco and Oakland, saying they endanger immigration officers who aren't allowed in jails and therefore must make more arrests in a community. The Oakland mayor's decision to publicize her suspicions about ICE operations further increased that risk for my officers and alerted criminal aliens, making clear that this reckless division was based on her political agenda with the very federal laws that ICE is sworn to uphold, was the quote.
American Indian tribes that say they have been cut out of California's legal marijuana market have raised the possibility of going their own way by establishing pot businesses outside the state-regulated system that is less than 2 months old. The possibility of tribes breaking away from the state-run system is one more challenge for California as it attempts to transform its long-standing medicinal and illegal marijuana markets into a unified multi-billion-dollar industry. For tribes participating in the state-run market, they have to give up their rights to act as governments with regard to cannabis, said Mark Leviton, a tribal attorney. At issue are legally thorny questions about who governs whom, taxation, and the intersection of state marijuana laws with tribes that the federal government recognizes as sovereign nations within the U.S. Under regulations issued last year, California would retain full control over licensing. Tribes would have to follow state rules, including submission to all enforcement, in order to obtain a license to grow or sell marijuana. Any application must include a waiver of sovereign immunity a sort of legal firewall that protects tribal interests.
And I believe Mike has the last news story of the night.
Though states and the federal government remain at odds on marijuana legalization, the drug is gaining traction as a viable treatment in workers' comp claims. A lot of court decisions have been favorable to reimbursing injured workers for marijuana due to chronic pain. However, reimbursement for medical marijuana is only being done on a voluntary basis because it is deemed a reasonable and necessary treatment, and also because it is typically cheaper than other treatment options. Some states have laws explicitly stating that an employer or workers' compensation insurer is not required to pay for medical marijuana. With so much media attention surrounding overdoses and overprescribing issues related to opioids, many experts agree that marijuana could be a very viable alternative. Marijuana is the only drug with a self-guided dosage with no real guidance from a doctor or pharmacist. Marijuana is still illegal at the federal level and is classified as a Schedule I drug under the Federal Controlled Substances Act. This is clearly the disconnect between the states and the federal government with respect to the laws governing marijuana.
And I couldn't think of a better way to end the show on guns than to have two stories on the legalization of marijuana. My name is Steve Appel. It's been a pleasure to be with you again on another edition of Work Comp Matters. If you like the show, subscribe. If you don't like the show, subscribe and tell a friend. You can listen to us in the car, at home, at work, on your smartphone, your tablet, on your computer. We're, of course, brought to you by A1 Law and Santa Monica Tickets. From my right-hand man, Mike Zyma, for the best-dressed man in workers' compensation, Ted Durden. From my protege, attorney Robert Ozeron. For Scott on the board, John Scalia, attorney John Scalia, back in Munich, Germany. And for all the good people back at Work Comp Central that continue to support and approve of this fantastic project, including but not limited to Leaf File and Jake Paris, my name is Steve Appel. We'll see you again next week for another edition of Work Comp Matters.